Jim Bellows made a career out of editing the second newspaper in the major media capitals of the United States. He was editor of the Washington Star as it took on the Washington Post. Later, he led the L.A. Herald Examiner as it competed with the L.A. Times. But he is best known for his time as the last editor of the New York Herald Tribune in the 1960s. He and his assembled writers at the Trib, which included Tom Wolfe and Jimmy Breslin, often credited with launching new journalism. His life and work is detailed in a new memoir and a documentary called The Last Editor. The film is airing on PBS stations this month. I'm pleased to have Jim Bellows at this table. Welcome. This is a great story about you. You couldn't be happier to come to the New York Herald Tribune at the time that you did.
Oh, perfect.
Why was it perfect?
Well, because, okay, it had this great tradition, but it also, and it won a bunch of very good writers. And your competition, really, even though there were 5 other newspapers in town besides the Trib and the Times. And, but that was your real competition with the Times. They had a hell of a lot more talent and more people, but we had a chance to make it go, and we tried awfully hard. And we got Tom Wolfe. I hired Tom Wolfe and Jimmy Breslin and Charlie Portis and Gail Sheehy. Well, Gail Sheehy was there when I got there. And a lot of young, bright talent.
And what was the operative idea?
The operative idea was make a fascinating newspaper that would...
In the world's most fascinating city.
Yes. I love L.A., and I probably spent more time there, but still, this is... New York is the... apex.
Has there been, in your judgment, a better experience in running the Herald Tribune?
No. You see, every day at the Trib, you have to remember that newspaper is wonderful that way, because every day it's different. And you've got a different schedule of news, and you're trying to get it done differently. And you've got these people there, this talented crew, and you sit down at 4 o'clock for the Trib that was going to be going to press at 8, and you'd ask different people what they've got and what they're covering, the city beat or the national or foreign, whatever, and pictures, and put that all together. Well, there isn't a better job in the world than being able to do that, sort of like an artist and believing you're an artist.
That's what's great about being an editor, though. You're an artist and you can paint with all these colors.
That's
all these
right.
colors happen to be these different reporters
You bet.
who come to you with great skill and craft and tell a story.
And you then were circulating in the newsroom every day and managing by chat and trying to get any ideas, any new ideas, and then you suggest something and say, go to it.
What does a great editor have to have?
The one thing about a newspaper man or somebody in that profession and so on is curiosity. And not only want to know about, let's say, you, if I was doing a story, but exactly what makes you do the things you do and all the details. Because a reporter's job is you get all these incidental details, and you're like a sorcerer in the way you use all those.
Yeah. Did you guys create new journalism there?
I'd have to get Tom here, Tom Wolfe, to explain all that. Because Tom did a book. We were trying to do things differently, and certainly Breslin and Wolfe were the best examples of that.
But what does new journalism mean to you?
So that there's feeling, and it's sort of like, well, a newspaper, you see, as far as I'm concerned, should be something like a human being. It should be, you've got opinions, you've got things you want to do, but you want some warmth there.
Color.
And you take the New York Times now, where they're doing these passionate things like a series that's going on now about the mentally ill and what they're doing with the Catholic Church. And yet yesterday in the second front was a picture of a pregnant woman standing there in the, I think it was in a bus, and all these men are sitting down. It's wonderful.
I'm going to take a look at this. This is a clip from a film, the documentary, The Last Editor, and this is the book, The Last Editor. But here is some of the reporters talking about the birth of new journalism. Here it is.
calling it the new journalism, which was a nonsense. We had been in the sports pages, on the sports pages, doing a column of the kind I do forever. And it was covering the city the way you covered a baseball game. Talk to a lot of people, get quotes, get color, get impressions, get feeling.
That was radical. It was the time when the Herald Tribune, I think leading the way, made the shift from the inverted pyramid of who, what, when, where, why, and cut from the bottom, into creating a storytelling tradition.
And the paper at that time cost a dime, and you could, in the dime, you could get a fabulous nonfiction short story by Jimmy Breslin. Now, that column was all thanks to Jim Bellows. Jim could see that there was tremendous potential here, far beyond sports.
It must be Jim Bellows at 40, huh?
Something like that, yes, that's right. Not
You were going to tell me a story about Breslin.
Well, Breslin, and I think it may be, I think it's in here in the video too, but when he went down, he said, I'm just going down, I've got to get down for the after the Kennedy assassination for the funeral. So Jimmy said, what do I do? There are all these people down here. So he went and interviewed the gravedigger, who was making $3.01 an hour. Yeah. I mean, it was just so telling for Jimmy to be able to figure out what would really...
That's the gifted reporter with a gifted eye who understands. Right. You know, there's a great story like that about the great photographer, Henri Cartier-Bresson, is that everybody at Churchill's funeral were photographing the funeral cortege that was on the river, you know. And he turned around and photographed everybody photographing it, and that was the one picture that stood out. Yeah. You know, the same thing, same instinct that Jimmy has. The Herald Tribune, in the end, died because Jock Whitney said, I can no longer afford to subsidize it?
Well, not really. They were trying to figure out some other way to keep it alive, and finally merged it with a couple of other papers there in New York. But there was an awful lot of labor problems, and that didn't help the situation, that's for sure. And I think some of the second papers have been able to sprint a little more for a while because they didn't have the labor problems.
Here's some of the people at the Herald Tribune recalling working there.
That all newsrooms used to have a sort of ink, and I don't even know where the smell came from. They all smell that way.
There was a motion and a rhythm to it, which was marvelous. And that's the two things with the typewriters and the smoke. And that was any place you went at 5:30 at night. That was the sound of the newspaper business in the city of New York.
What was the biggest story you had in Los Angeles when you went to the Herald Examiner?
Well, we had two wonderful stories. But
yes.
Okay, the first was a very serious story where the police
investigative stuff.
were trying to collect a $22.09, helping the gas company collect a $22.09 gas bill from a woman in Watts. And she had somehow threatened him, and so they called the police, and then they shot her and filled her with bullets, and it was just a real storm that we created, and we've heard of the story only out of a one-paragraph story that they ran in the LA Times. Yeah. This is a perfect example of the second paper, how we can keep the first paper honest. And then we ran it every day on the front page, and most of the way, over weeks and weeks, to get the police straightened out on their misconduct. And the Times finally had to come around and join us in the campaign.
The story.
Yes.
And the second story?
Oh, the second story was Bubbles.
Bubbles. And who was Bubbles?
Bubbles was an escaped hippo in Orange County. And the pictures of that were wonderful because they had all these people lined up out in the park area in Orange County trying to...
And
then finally they fed her something to get the hippo out of a lake, and the hippo died, and it was pregnant, and it was just a great story.
And in fact, as the film shows, that night everybody was talking about it. Wherever you went to dinner, they were saying, "Did you hear? Bubbles died." I mean, there was a sadness in L.A. because you'd made this hippo so famous. fast forward to today. You also had a period in there in which you were with Entertainment Tonight.
Yes.
Are you celebrating that anniversary soon or
Well,
tomorrow night?
last weekend was the 20th anniversary,
Yeah.
and so we felt very good. The people that were back there in the beginning, you know.
This paper,
It was great fun.
Howell Raines is now the editor of this paper. Took over a week, maybe 3 or 4 days before September 11th. Many people believe that he has taken it to new heights.
Yes.
Do you?
Yeah, oh, I certainly do. I mean, because it has given him the breadth and width of that spectrum now is wider and better and more interesting, and that's what I mean about a sort of being a human being you're going out to pick up on your front porch every day.
This is.
Yes. No, because
being...
it has both the hard news and the soft news, and it really put that together in such a wonderful pattern. I mean, the New York Times, by far and away, is so much better a paper than any other paper that I've heard of in this country.
Well, the point is, some people believe the distance is widening, that somehow it has gotten because it was presented with an opportunity to cover such a huge story, it rose to the occasion.
Yeah.
Others did too, as the Pulitzer Prizes, if they reflect anything, reflect that it's not the only great paper.
Yeah.
But the fact that it got 7 Pulitzers reflects something.
A great deal, right.
It's been an extraordinary voyage for you.
Oh, yes. And I'm right now looking for a job.
I'll do whatever I can.
The newspaper, they need a second newspaper in L.A. And the former mayor is trying to start one. He wants to start it with a New York Observer.
Is that right? So you're talking to Richard? Is this Richard Reardon?
Well,
Who is this?
Yeah, Richard Reardon.
Right.
And I already own the domain name for laobserver.com. So I'd like to get together on all this.
Does he know this?
Oh, yes.
Well,
be great fun at 80.
At 80 to do that. You're going great, Jim. It's great to have you on this broadcast. And just to reflect, we only touched what has been a remarkable journey in journalism, from those early stories as a reporter to editing some of the best reporters and putting together and bring an individual stamp on all these newspapers that you've had something to do about. The subtitle of this is How I Saved the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the LA Times, none of which you edited, How I Saved them from dullness and complacency.
Cheeky bravado. Okay.
Cheeky bravado is what you have there. Maureen Dowd of the New York Times says, Tom Wolfe was lucky enough to work for an editor whom I was once lucky enough to work for, Jim Bellows, a newspaper man with verve and bravery in equal measure, who always backed up his reporters and who loved nothing better than to do a joyous rain dance in a hail of criticism.
Good.
Good luck.
Thank you very much. Appreciate being here.
Thank you for joining us. See you next time.